On the evening of Friday, September 5th, 2025, surveillance cameras in Chicago's South Loop neighborhood captured what prosecutors would later describe as devastating evidence in a first-degree murder case. Multiple cameras, positioned at different angles around the 1300 block of South Michigan Avenue, allegedly recorded the complete sequence of events, from a routine customer dispute inside a smoke shop to a fatal shooting on the sidewalk, and finally, what authorities claim was an attempt to manipulate the crime scene. This case raises critical questions about oversight in the private security industry, the enforcement of Illinois firearm regulations, and the power of video evidence in modern criminal prosecution. It involves a 31-year-old customer who, according to court documents, was shot and killed following a dispute over a minor transaction. And it centers on 33-year-old Soliman Diallo, a security guard who prosecutors allege had no legal authorization to carry the weapon he used. Welcome back to 10 by 10 Confidential, where we investigate the cases that demand answers. Thank you so much for watching our videos and supporting investigative true crime content. If you appreciate the detailed forensic analysis we bring to these cases, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you get notifications whenever we release our next investigation. Today's case involves surveillance cameras that captured every moment of a deadly encounter in Chicago's South Loop, from a routine customer dispute to first-degree murder to evidence tampering. This is a story about system failures, illegal firearms, and the power of video evidence to expose the truth. Let's examine what really happened on that September night. To understand what allegedly occurred on that September evening, we must first understand the location and the players involved. The South Loop is a neighborhood located just south of downtown Chicago, along South Michigan Avenue. Over the past 2 decades, this area has undergone significant development and gentrification. Historic buildings now stand alongside modern apartment complexes, restaurants, and small businesses. It's a busy commercial district where people live, work, and socialize. In the 1300 block of South Michigan Avenue sits a small smoke shop, the kind of retail establishment that sells vape products, rolling papers, and cannabis accessories. Like many businesses in urban Chicago, this shop employed security personnel. On the evening of September 5th, 2025, that security guard was Soliman Diallo. According to court documents filed by the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, Diallo was 33 years old and resided in the 2700 block of South Prairie Avenue, also in Chicago. His role that evening was straightforward: monitor the store, assist with customer issues, and maintain safety for employees and patrons. But prosecutors allege that Diallo was operating under false pretenses. According to charging documents and evidence presented at his detention hearing, Diallo possessed no firearm owner's identification card, commonly called a FOID card in Illinois. This card is the foundational requirement for legal firearm possession in the state. Without a valid FOID card, prosecutors contend, possessing any firearm is illegal under Illinois law. Court records further indicate that Diallo had no concealed carry license, which would be required to legally carry a concealed weapon. Additionally, according to statements made by Assistant State's Attorney Mike Picara during the detention hearing, Diallo possessed no credentials from the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation, no PERC card or other licensing that would authorize him to work as a security guard, particularly as armed security. Prosecutors also revealed that Diallo had a prior criminal history. According to court filings in 2023, he was convicted in Cook County of reckless conduct. However, that conviction allegedly originated as a more serious charge: aggravated unlawful use of a weapon. This prior case, prosecutors argue, demonstrates that Diallo had previous knowledge of Illinois firearms laws and had been previously charged with violating them. Despite this background, Diallo was reportedly working as an armed security guard on September 5th, 2025. He was allegedly wearing body armor and carrying a loaded Glock 19 pistol, a 9mm handgun. How he obtained this employment and this weapon would become central questions in both the criminal case and potential civil litigation. The victim, in this case, was a 31-year-old male customer. Out of respect for the victim's family and privacy considerations, We'll refer to him as the victim or the customer throughout this presentation. According to court documents, he entered the smoke shop that evening for what appeared to be a routine visit. According to the timeline presented by prosecutors at the detention hearing on September 8, 2025, the sequence of events began around 9 p.m. on Friday, September 5th. Court documents indicate that the 31-year-old customer entered the smoke shop and attempted to conduct a transaction with an employee. Specifically, prosecutors allege he tried to exchange cannabis for a rolling tray. The employee reportedly refused this exchange, and an argument developed between the customer and the store employee. At this point, according to surveillance footage referenced in court filings, Souleymane Diallo intervened in his capacity as security guard. Prosecutors state that Diallo instructed the customer to leave the premises. Rather than ending the interaction, both men allegedly moved outside to the sidewalk on South Michigan Avenue. What happened next, according to evidence presented to Judge Ravanda Das-Beal, was captured on multiple surveillance cameras. Prosecutors allege that the two men engaged in a heated verbal argument that lasted for more than 10 minutes. According to Assistant State's Attorney Picara's presentation, during this entire extended confrontation, the surveillance footage shows no weapons were visible and no immediate physical threats were made. It was, prosecutors contend, a verbal dispute between two angry individuals. Then, according to court documents, at approximately 9:25 p.m., Diallo allegedly made a decision. Surveillance footage reportedly shows him breaking off the argument and walking back inside the smoke shop. Once inside, prosecutors allege cameras captured Diallo removing his coat. Critically, prosecutors state that a cashier who was present inside the shop would later provide testimony about what occurred next. According to the state's attorney's presentation, Diallo allegedly told the cashier that he intended to fight the customer. The cashier, according to this account, pleaded with Diallo not to go back outside and not to re-engage with the customer. Prosecutors allege that Diallo ignored this plea. Surveillance footage allegedly shows him leaving the shop and returning to the sidewalk where the customer remained. According to the court presentation, video evidence shows Diallo's body language as aggressive. He was allegedly rolling up his sleeves as he exited, which prosecutors characterize as preparing for a physical confrontation. The customer, seeing Diallo approaching, allegedly raised his fists in what prosecutors describe as a defensive posture. According to the allegations, the customer then pushed Diallo, causing the security guard to fall to the ground. What allegedly happened next is central to the first-degree murder charge. Rather than remaining on the ground, calling for assistance, or retreating, prosecutors contend that Diallo immediately stood up and drew his Glock 19 pistol. Surveillance footage allegedly shows the customer, upon seeing the firearm, turning and running down the sidewalk in an attempt to flee. Prosecutors allege that Diallo did not use the weapon to create distance or to call for the customer to stop while summoning police. Instead, according to court documents, Diallo began pursuing the fleeing customer down South Michigan Avenue. During this pursuit, prosecutors allege, surveillance cameras captured several critical moments. According to the state's presentation, video shows Diallo pushing the customer into a planter during the chase. More significantly, prosecutors state that footage from cameras positioned across the street clearly shows Diallo performing a specific action, racking the slide of his Glock 19 pistol. For those unfamiliar with firearms operation, racking the slide means pulling back the top portion of the pistol and releasing it, which chambers a round from the magazine into the firing position. This action, prosecutors argue, is deliberate and demonstrates preparation to discharge the weapon. It requires conscious effort and intent. According to the allegations, Diallo performed this action while actively chasing an unarmed individual who was attempting to escape. Surveillance footage from across the street allegedly shows the customer backing away, trying to create distance from the armed pursuer. Prosecutors state that the customer made one final defensive action. He swung at Diallo in an apparent attempt to keep the armed man away from him. According to court documents, at approximately 9:30 p.m., Diallo allegedly raised his Glock 19 and fired one shot. The medical evidence, according to court filings, indicates that the bullet struck the victim in the cheek. The projectile traveled upward through the victim's skull and exited through the top of his head. This wound, medical examiners would later determine, was fatal. But prosecutors allege that what happened immediately after the shooting is equally significant to the case. According to Assistant State's Attorney Picara's presentation at the detention hearing, surveillance cameras continued recording after the shot was fired. The footage allegedly shows Diallo standing over the victim, who had collapsed on the sidewalk. Prosecutors contend that rather than calling for medical assistance or stepping back to await police, Diallo allegedly bent down toward the victim's body. According to court documents, the surveillance video shows Diallo moving the victim's body and then placing his Glock 19 pistol underneath or near the victim's hand. This action, prosecutors argued, was an intentional staging of the crime scene designed to create false physical evidence. By positioning the weapon near the victim's hand, prosecutors allege Diallo was attempting to fabricate a narrative that the victim had possessed or grabbed for the gun, a claim that would support a self-defense argument. Emergency services were called to the scene. Chicago Police Department officers from the 1st District arrived at approximately 9:31 p.m., just 1 minute after the shooting allegedly occurred. According to police reports filed with the court, officers found the victim suffering from a severe gunshot wound to the head. Paramedics transported him to a nearby hospital where, according to court documents, he was pronounced deceased shortly after arrival. At the scene, according to court filings, Diallo provided a statement to responding officers. Prosecutors state that Diallo allegedly told police that the victim had grabbed for his weapon, suggesting that the shooting occurred during a struggle over the firearm. This statement, prosecutors note, appeared to be corroborated by the physical evidence at the scene, specifically the position of the Glock 19 near the victim's hand. Diallo was arrested at 9:31 p.m. and taken into custody by Chicago police. The investigation that followed would prove crucial to the charges ultimately filed against Diallo. According to court documents, detectives began reviewing available evidence, including the surveillance footage from multiple cameras positioned around the 1300 block of South Michigan Avenue. Prosecutors alleged that this video evidence told a very different story than the one Diallo had provided to police. Rather than showing a struggle over a weapon or a victim grabbing for a gun, the footage allegedly documented Diallo as the aggressor throughout the encounter, announcing his intent to fight, ignoring pleas to stop, pursuing an unarmed and fleeing individual, preparing his weapon during that pursuit, and shooting a person who was attempting to escape. The surveillance video also allegedly captured the moment when Diallo positioned the weapon near the victim's hand, directly contradicting his claim of self-defense and suggesting, prosecutors argue, consciousness of guilt. On Monday, September 8, 2025, the Cook County State's Attorney's Office filed formal charges against Suleiman Diallo. According to court records, he was charged with 2 felony counts. First, 1 count of murder in the first degree. Under Illinois law, this charge requires prosecutors to prove that the defendant either intended to kill or cause great bodily harm, or knew that such actions would cause death or great bodily harm. The charge carries a potential sentence of 20 years to life in prison upon conviction. Second, 1 count of aggravated unlawful use of a weapon, specifically being a person in possession of a loaded firearm without a valid FOID card. This charge addresses the alleged illegal possession of the Glock 19 pistol. Later that same day, a detention hearing was held. The judge granted the state's detention petition, ordering that Diallo be held without the possibility of pretrial release at the Cook County Jail, pending resolution of the charges. This decision reflected the court's finding that the evidence presented clear and convincing proof of danger to the community. The case also raised significant questions about civil liability. Legal experts note that the victim's family would have grounds to file a wrongful death lawsuit, not only against Diallo, but potentially against the smoke shop that employed him. Such a suit could allege negligent hiring practices, specifically failure to verify that security personnel possessed the required licenses and credentials. The case of Suleiman Diallo and the September 5, 2025 shooting in Chicago's South Loop represents a convergence of alleged individual criminal conduct and systemic regulatory failures. At the individual level, prosecutors allege a deliberate series of choices: announcing an intent to fight, ignoring warnings to de-escalate, pursuing an unarmed person with a drawn weapon, preparing that weapon to fire during the pursuit, shooting a fleeing individual, and then allegedly attempting to manipulate evidence and provide false information to investigators. If proven beyond a reasonable doubt at trial, these allegations support the serious charges filed. At the systemic level, the case raises troubling questions about oversight in the private security industry. How, legal observers ask, did an individual allegedly lacking all required credentials and possessing a prior weapons-related conviction obtain employment as an armed security guard? What background verification, if any, was conducted? What regulatory gaps allowed this situation to develop? These questions have implications beyond this single case. If the allegations are proven true, they suggest vulnerabilities in the current system of security industry regulation and employment verification. Vulnerabilities that could enable similar tragedies elsewhere. For the victim's family, the legal proceedings offer a path toward justice and accountability, though no legal outcome can restore their loss. Souleymane Diallo is presumed innocent until proven guilty. He will have the opportunity to present a defense, challenge the evidence, and receive a fair trial. Thank you so much for watching this investigation into the South Loop smoke shop shooting. If you found this forensic analysis valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe to 10 by 10 Confidential for more detailed true crime investigations. Don't forget to click the bell icon so you never miss our next case. We appreciate every single one of you who supports this channel. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think businesses should face criminal charges, not just civil liability, when they employ unlicensed armed security who commits murder? Should the smoke shop owners be held criminally responsible for allowing an illegally armed individual to work as their security guard? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your perspectives help shape future investigations. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next case.